Hey, this is Chad with Be Gone for Good. Today we're going to be talking about the different ways that you can, and I have specifically, tried to keep awake and aware while I'm on a long road trip on the bike. But first, let me throw a shout out to Doug Jersich, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, for coming up with this idea today. He's about to take a pretty long trip through the western side of the United States and wanted to know if I had any tips or ideas for how to stay awake and aware on the bike as you're pushing mileage through the day. Now, I've done more than a couple of trips where I've pushed some extensive mileage during the course of my day-to-day travels, and I already deal with highway hypnosis pretty badly. So these are some of the ideas that I had to keep awake, to keep aware, and to keep alive while I'm on that bike during those long trips. On my trip down to Mexico, I had huge amounts of mileage that I was pushing over the course of about 2 weeks. We're talking anywhere between 300 to 800 miles during one day. And often, I would need something to keep me engaged and going, because some of those streets and roads, especially southern Texas and northern Mexico, are just long, straight, nothing. It was super hot. You had to find a way to keep engaged on that bike, or you could easily fall asleep. It wouldn't be difficult. One of the ways I did it, and was a tip from my buddy that was on the trip with me, was to do an audiobook. Now, when it comes to the audiobooks, there's obviously a huge plethora that you could choose from. But I specifically chose horror. I was listening to Stephen King's It because it was one of the best ways to kind of get my mind going. If I was emotionally involved, obviously, then that would keep me awake on the bike a little bit longer. I will caution you against one thing though. If you listen to horror on the bike, especially 4 to 6 to 8 hours of horror during the course of the day, it tends to have a little bit of an impact on your overall attitude and kind of your psyche. You may need to take a break every now and again to just feel better about your world, especially if anybody's read It. It is brutal. And so every now and again I would need to just put on some happy music, and I would need to relax and put the audiobook at the backside again, because it could bring down your overall morale pretty quickly if all you're doing is listening to horror books all day. So it's a great way to keep moving, but just make sure you have something else to kind of cheer you up if that's how you're gonna go. To piggyback on that, music is another great option for keeping you awake, keeping you engaged on the bike during a long trip. I think it does have to be a certain kind of music though. Even if you're a classical or jazz fan, that's probably not what you want to be listening to on the bike if you want to keep going. I would argue things that you're sing-along songs type of thing, high energy, music that can keep you going. One of my favorites to turn on if I'm feeling a little bit off is Baba O'Reilly by The Who. For some reason, that song just gets me going. It gets my heart pumping. I'm feeling excited and ready to go. And when you're on the open road with that song going, it's one of the most spectacular ways to listen to that song. Another option, and maybe a little bit lesser known, is podcasts. Now, this is a tough one because most podcasts are sort of just free form, just a person talking. There's not a lot involved in it. So it could also be pretty boring if you're not careful. It depends what gets you moving, what gets you engaged. If you have something on there that seems really exciting, I will link some podcasts that I like to listen to, especially on long trips, down below in the description. You can take a look at them. Maybe they work for you, maybe they don't. Ultimately, the best thing to know is that you've got a huge store of possibility there. So before you leave for your trip, run through some podcasts, see if anything really kind of gets you moving, anything that's really exciting to you, and might be another option to flip over to if the music isn't working or your book isn't working or anything else. So this next tip actually came from my college years when I was driving back and forth to school, sometimes alone, sometimes with a buddy, but often late at night or early in the morning, and really on some brutally boring roads in central Illinois. I used to chew on sunflower seeds. For some reason, that action just automatically kept me awake. It worked better than holding water in my mouth or holding a $20 bill out the window or all the other things you can do to try and stay awake while you're driving in the car. Seeds are my go-to 100% no-fail option. The problem is inside a helmet, seeds can get a little messy and really difficult to deal with. So that's unfortunately not an option for me while I'm on the bike. However, I do find that if I can get gum, often that can help me out a little bit as well. Now, I stay away from fruity gums. I try to stick with the peppermints and the spearmints. I don't know why. Maybe that doesn't matter at all, but for some reason it changed it for me. When you chew gum, often you can make it a brainless activity and just not pay attention to it. I find if I try and chew in certain sequences, whether that's pounding out the alphabet with my teeth, or chewing it 3 times on this side and 3 times on that side. Anything you can do to kind of play around with that fairly normal activity will keep your mind engaged and going. It sounds totally ridiculous, it sounds totally insane, but if you have 150 miles that you have to make in the next 4 hours, maybe it's worth taking a look at. All right, up next, I have an option that for some reason didn't occur to me until I was on my way back from the Utah BDR this past year, making my way all the way to Pennsylvania. And I had a huge stretch between Ohio and Pennsylvania that I was really struggling with. It was the end of about 3 weeks worth of a trip. It was super hot, I was super wiped out. I was alone at this point. My 2 riding buddies had gone in different directions, and I just was having a hard time keeping my head upright. So what I did is I punched in my GPS, no highways, no tolls, no main roads, anything along those lines, and went off the beaten path a little bit. If you get off the highway and you start taking lefts and rights and going through little towns and seeing a bunch of the local community, you'll find that you're automatically more interested in your ride, you're more engaged in your ride. It might take a little bit longer, but your mind is going to be ready to go for that ride. I think it's the highway riding that really drives you down. It's watching those lines just blow past you for mile after mile after mile without having to worry about any turns or changes in the environment. That can just be brutal on your head and just force you into, lulling you into sleep, what they call the highway hypnosis. If you're having that issue, get off the highway for a little bit. It might only take 20 miles to kind of rejuvenate you and get you excited about your ride again. And then you can get back on the highway and push those miles a little bit faster. As I was going through Pennsylvania, I got off the highway and I went through and saw small towns. I mean, like milk jugs out on the front porch and kids riding horses down the side of the road, and just like little corner stores. It was amazing. It was like a scene out of a Norman Rockwell painting, and it was just so interesting to ride through that I immediately felt reinvigorated and ready to go, and did that all the way to my final destination. It took about an hour longer, maybe an hour and a half longer, but was totally worth it because I didn't have the issues with falling asleep anymore. Up next, I've got another option that I'm sure everybody knows, but I'm going to include it in this list just in case it's something that might help you out. It's stopping a little bit more often. I can go probably about 2 hours in between fill-ups when I'm first starting to ride, with about 120, 160 miles per tank on the bike. Now, as I start getting later in the day, as I start getting more tired, more fatigued, I might change that to every hour, maybe every even 45 minutes, stopping, pulling over, getting off the bike for 10, 20 minutes just to get my legs underneath me, get the blood flowing again. Then I get back out on the road, ready to go and refreshed. This can be as simple as just pulling into a rest stop and getting a couple of minutes off the bike, take a look around, see if you find anything that's interesting to look at, anybody to talk to. These things will kind of get you going again and give you a little bit more energy to get back on the bike and continue your trip. For this next one, I struggled a little bit on whether or not to include this in here because it's a little bit embarrassing. But ultimately, if it helps you get to where you're going and keeps you awake on the bike and in a more aware condition, then let's do it. One of my favorite things to do if I'm starting to feel a little bit off is to put on some good music and dance. Everybody knows you can stand up on an adventure bike. Everybody knows that you can move around a little bit up there, and I do. Sometimes I get some strange looks in traffic. Sometimes people are honking at me. Sometimes people think it's hilarious. But when I get up on that bike and I need to shake out my legs a little bit, dancing sometimes is the best way to do it. And I'll tell you, you will find no better energy producer than getting up and rocking out to a song that you love in your helmet, on the bike, traveling down the road at 60, 70 miles an hour. It is just invigorating in a way that few things are, and keeps you going for a little bit extra mileage if you need to push. All right, I am totally wiped out. That's my list. Those are the things that you can do if you need to push miles on a bike. and you need to have some extra energy to do that, these are some options that you can do to make that long road trip a possibility for you. Ultimately, the best option is just to stop. Once you start feeling fatigue and tiredness kind of creep in, it's best to, oh my God, I can't do this. Once you start feeling fatigue and tiredness set in, your best option is to get off the bike. Maybe that's just taking a break for the night, you get a motel, you get a campsite, maybe you just need to get a decent meal. Take some time off the bike, get yourself back in a situation where you've got the energy to get back on the bike. The worst thing you can do is continue pushing as you feel that fatigue and that tiredness come on top of you. You don't want to be falling asleep on the bike. I can tell you this from experience. On my way through Mexico, I had a couple of times where I had some healthy scares because I was falling asleep on the bike. It is not a position that you want to be in, and it's definitely not one you want to push once those first signs start presenting themselves. If you need to push a little bit extra, these are all options that can kind of give you a little bit of extra boost and get you to where you need to go. The last thing I want to do is tell any of you to be unsafe out there, so you have to be responsible for yourself. You have to gauge your own capabilities in this. I've been wrong a few times and I've been lucky. I've also been capable of using some of these tricks to push a little bit further. So pay attention to your body, pay attention to what you're doing. Use these if you need to. That's everything I've got for you for my tips to stay awake and aware on the bike over long trips. If you have anything else that you do, anything that you like to push a little bit extra energy in, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think of my dancing as well, because I'm guessing my wife would love to hear it. Thank you very much for listening. Again, I'm Chad with Be Gone for Good. We do videos all about adventure motorcycling, from the trips and bikes that I'm riding to tips and tutorials like this. If you like what you're seeing, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for future notifications and updates about videos that we're uploading. And if you liked what you saw here, hit that thumbs up. It really helps us out a lot here at the channel. I want to thank everybody for watching. Signing off.